Hi guys, it's Ashley and welcome back to Dumb Blonde Books. Today I am filming a very long awaited video for you of the top 10 books that I read last year in 2022. Like I said in my last video, I know I've been MIA for a long time, so long that I didn't get to wrap up the year with you guys. I just figure better late than never, and I have some really incredible books that I have not yet gotten to talk to you guys about. Some new favorites, some that you've already probably heard me talk about in other videos, but I know I also have some new subscribers on here. So if you are a new subscriber, hi, I'm so excited to talk to you guys about some of my favorites that you maybe haven't heard me talk about yet. And if you're watching this and you have not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. I put out new videos as often as I can. I read mostly thrillers, horror, and romance, but I am open to other genres as well. I love talking to you guys in the comments and hearing your opinions on books that I'm about to read, books that I should read, books that you absolutely hated. I want to know it all. But I digress. I have here in order my top 10 favorite books of last year. I'm just so excited, so let's get into it. So starting at number 10, we have They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This book follows a woman named Scarlett Clark, and she is an English professor at a university, and in her free time, she hunts down and kills students, teachers, men who deserve it for assaulting women on campus. And she is just such an icon for that. We love that. It's a very good for her book. And we also get alternating chapters from another character's perspective. I read this book in the fall, and I would also recommend that you read it in the fall to get you in sort of that like university mood, if that makes sense. The dark academia vibes are so strong in this book. The twists were strong, although I did see them coming. I didn't mind. And that is saying something when I'm like,
oh yeah, that was very obvious. I saw that coming.
But then it doesn't ruin the experience for me. The ending did, however, catch me off guard. Strong twists, a strong message, immaculate fall vibes. I'm sure you've already read it, but if you haven't, I highly recommend They Never Learn. Next, at number 9, something that you've heard me talk about ad nauseum, we have Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez. I did a whole vlog where I read this and you get my live reaction to this book. I'll link it above. So this was my foray into the extreme horror genre that I decided to begin in 2022. It absolutely pushed the boundary of what I thought. There's the rabbit outside. There's a cute little bunny right outside my window. Can I show you? You see him? I'm distracted because he's very cute. Anyways, so before I had read any extreme horror, I think I had this preconceived notion of what I thought it was going to be like. And this book absolutely flipped that idea on its head and completely proved me wrong. This pushed the boundaries of what I thought extreme horror could be, but I loved it. Let me tell you what it's about. So it follows a couple who is going on this romantic getaway. And before the couple can make it to their vacation destination, the wife gets snatched. She gets kidnapped. And the kidnappers want the wife, her name is Lisa, to star in a torture film, and she has to survive. And the things she does to survive, I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this book. Just the ride that this book takes you on. If you are new to me or new to my channel or new to extreme horror, know that this is disturbing. It's extremely disturbing. And if you don't think you can handle it, don't read it. And don't blame me if you read it and want to die. Okay? Just making sure we're on the same page. At number 8, I decided I'm going to do 2 books because I didn't want to separate them. And I don't think I've talked about these yet on my channel. So at number 8, we have It Happened One Summer and the sequel, Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. Yeah, these books really just like did something to me. Phenomenal. The characters, they were just hot. Before I just like totally short circuit, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what they're about. So this is the first book. It happened one summer and it follows Piper. She's this like very stereotypical girl's girl. She likes to shop, she likes makeup, she likes nice things, and she gets cut off from her dad, who's this like wealthy, I think he's a director or like a film producer. And so her father sends her to this little seaside port of a town to sort of teach her a lesson, to learn how to like work for herself, provide for herself, not just like be spoiled. And she meets this fisherman named Brendan. And Brendan is very rugged, rough around the edges. I hate that saying, but I don't know how else to describe him. There is such amazing chemistry between these two. And I loved that chapters would alternate between each of their perspectives. Girl, I didn't know that that was a thing that happened in romance books, but it makes it like a million times hotter. And the sequel follows Piper's sister Hannah, who's like a DJ. She's like really into like music and like records and vinyl, and I think her job is to find soundtracks for movies. In this one, the love interest, his name is Fox, and it's giving like Tyler Cameron from The Bachelor, like very suave and like ladies man, like everybody loves him. I'm so bad at explaining romance because it's just like, yep, it's a romance. I enjoyed it. Highly recommend. Next up at number 7, I have The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. This book follows a woman named Amber, who is a little schemy scammer girl. And Amber decides that she is done being poor. She was built for luxury and all the finer things, baby. And so she sets her sights on this wealthy, wealthy family. And she decides she's going to scheme her way from the inside to basically stealing the wife's life. She's gonna start by working at his company. Then she's gonna start nannying the kids. Then she's gonna get the husband to fall in love with her, get him to leave his wife. It starts so small, and then you just see how smart she is and like weaselly, and how she just like, bitch, I'm gonna snatch your life. It's that kind of a book. But there is a massive twist that I won't spoil. The way that this book describes everything from the silverware on the table to the wallpaper, the gravel roads in the mansions, the shoes, the bags, like it is everything. I know that maybe I'm in the minority for enjoying books like that, but if you love a good rich people thriller, this is the blueprint. This is the classic. You've probably already read it. I'm just here to let you know that I enjoyed it. Next, at number 6, we have another classic, girl. It's The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I'm sorry this list is so basic, but it's just the 10 best books I read last year. So this book follows a group of friends who are headed to this island off the coast of Ireland for a wedding. In true Lucy Foley fashion, you know at the beginning of the book that someone has died, but you don't know who died, you don't know who killed them, and you don't know when the two timelines are going to converge. So at any moment, you're kind of like waiting for someone to drop dead, which is very fun. I had just heard so much hype about this book that I thought there was no way that it was going to be anything of note. And I remember my jaw actually hitting the floor. I remember throwing the book across the room, and I remember being so shook that this had the effect on me the way that it did. This is one of the few books I read last year with a twist that I did not see coming. It was so satisfying to finally read a thriller that caught me off guard. I know not everybody jives with Lucy Foley's writing style, but I love the way that she writes characters. I feel that they're always so dynamic and so different from each other. I never confuse her characters, which is difficult in a thriller when there are usually a bazillion characters. Also, just the way she writes atmosphere and builds suspense is just so good. I feel a little basic for liking this book as much as I do, but again, if you for some reason haven't read this yet, I think you really should. Next up at number 5 on the list, we have The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This book follows a woman named Shay who has recently discovered that one of her really good college friends has committed suicide, and something just does not sit right with her about her friend Laurel committing suicide and the scene of the crime. So she enlists the help from another one of her friends who is also a true crime podcast host, which is kind of a fun element to have in the book because they incorporate sort of like a podcast structure element to some of the chapters. I don't want to spoil anything about this book because I feel like the bulk of why I love this book so much was because I went in blind. I will just say this book has to do with cults. I don't think that's a spoiler. But if anything about like cults or like brainwashing mass groups of people interests you, this is a very, very good book. I gave this book 5 stars, like I have so many of the other books on this list. But I just want to stress to you that although I can't tell you much about this book, some of the imagery still lives in my head rent-free. The end of this book is such a gut punch. Ooh, she went there. Sometimes you finish a book and you're like, oh, like, I wished a little bit more would have happened. Nope, this ends with such a bang, and it is such a good for her book. Highly, highly recommend. Next, at number 4 on my list, we have No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is such a funny copy that I have. It's a little mass market, but this is the copy that I read. This book follows a girl named Darby who is headed home to Utah to take care of her dying mother, and she has to traverse through this extreme blizzard. And as she is making her way through this blizzard, cops pull her over and they're like, girl, you're gonna need to head to the nearest rest stop and wait out the storm because it is not safe to drive, you dumb bitch. So we find ourselves at this rest stop with this random cast of characters. A little bit of time passes. Darby realizes she doesn't have cell service. So as she's sort of walking around in the snow outside of the rest stop, she hears something in one of the parked cars, and she looks inside and sees a child in a cage. And she realizes that somebody inside of the rest stop is trafficking children, and she needs to decide what she's going to do, not only to survive the blizzard, but to survive the night and hopefully save this little girl in the process. This is such a classic. This book has you on the edge of your seat from the jump, and the main twist in this book, I would say, comes early. By the way, the twist is not the synopsis I just gave you. That's on the back of the book. The situational twist of like the chess pieces that are set up is revealed very early on, which is kind of fun for a thriller because then you just get to let the action play out. And there are other crazy action-packed things that happen that I don't want to give away. But oh my God, if you want just like a roller coaster of a thriller to the finish line, to the last sentence, this book is phenomenal. I'm sure if you're on BookTube, you've already read it, but man, this is just a firecracker of a book. I'm so excited to read the new Taylor Adams that just came out. I just bought it at Barnes & Noble, so I'm hoping it's just a fraction of how good this was. We're in the home stretch, guys. I also went ahead and just combined 2 books because it is a sequel. At number 3, we have For the Sake of by Judith Sonnet and For the Sake of 2, also by Judith Sonnet. These freaking books, oh my God. These are extreme horror books, and the original follows a woman named Tabby whose young daughter has been missing for like 6 months, and she hasn't heard anything until one day she gets a brown paper sack on her doorstep with a picture of her daughter. The people that have taken her daughter have decided they want to play a game with this young mom and see what she is willing to do for the sake of rescuing her young daughter. Wild. Just wild. And then the sequel is even better, baby. Oh my god. Like Squid Games, but for extreme horror fans. So in the second book, we're following a totally different story, but the same like group of people that like to play these crazy, disgusting games. Their new target is this couple who met on a dating site, and while they're out at dinner, they get a phone call that their 2 children from previous marriages, whatever, have been held captive by them, and if they want to see them live, they need to do whatever they say. And so they get taken to this like grand stage in this mansion, just like disgusting wealthy people, like disgustingly wealthy, but also like disgusting wealthy people. And they basically have to compete against each other to save their children. It is a game show, first of all. So it's broadcast on like the dark web to other disgusting people who like pay to watch this. It also plays out live so people can get like VIP tickets to watch these insane acts happen in person. These books are on the same level as Survivor, I would say, if not worse. These are another one of those books that like I'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking about and being like, wow, that was written on paper. Like, but they're so good and they're so entertaining, and like my little mind just loves to see the envelope being pushed. These books made such an impression on me and definitely solidified the fact that I am obsessed with extreme horror. So 10 out of 10 for both of these. This next one, I know I'm gonna get some backlash for, but do I care? Not a bit. Not a bit. At number two of my favorite books I read last year, we have Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Are you shocked? I'm a little shocked. But the fact that this book has stuck with me and I could tell you exactly what happened in it since I read it a year ago, it deserves the spot, baby. Oh yeah. This book takes place in the 80s and it follows a college student named Charlie who has accepted a ride carpool situation from the Ride Board, which is basically a bulletin board where you can say like, okay,
I'm headed east over Christmas break. Who wants to hop in my car?
It was the 80s. So she accepts a ride with this man who she doesn't know, hasn't met, but she's like, oh, chill, we're headed the same direction. So that's fine. So they start driving, it's fine, road trip vibes, whatever. Charlie's roommate at college that year was murdered by what they're calling the campus killer. And as she's in the car with this man, she starts to get the feeling that he is the campus killer. Another little detail I'll sprinkle in for you, it's on the back of the book, it's not a spoiler, is the fact that Charlie has this condition where her mind will portray reality to her in a way that is false. And she calls them like movies in her head where something will be going on and then she'll snap out of it and she'll realize that that was not going on in reality. And I know that that seems really dumb and far-fetched, but when you're in it, when you're reading it, I was not bothered by it. I thought it was an excellent way to add suspense because the whole time you're like, is this really happening? Is this in her head? So while that is going through your mind, you're not super paying attention to other twists that could be thrown your way. I was so shocked by these twists. And did I care if they were a little stupid or far-fetched? No, because I didn't see them coming, and this book was so stupidly fun. And also just the underlying message that Riley Sager had in this book to just like make the reader so frustrated with our main character. Why didn't she get out of the car? Why didn't she run when she was at the gas station? It made you kind of want to victim blame, which you catch yourself doing, and you're like,
no, like, that's bad. I shouldn't do that.
was that his whole point? Who knows? All I know is that this book was stupid fun. I was a huge fan of the epilogue and the way that this book wrapped up. I loved it. And I am so glad that I read it despite all of the negative reviews that it had been getting on BookTube, because it's my number 2 favorite book that I read last year. If you read it, you might hate it. But I'm realizing that the books that really work for me are usually very polarizing. Slay. So books that usually take huge gambles, I'm usually a fan of. This was one of them, and I highly, highly recommend. So here we are. The number 1 book that I read last year in 2022 is... I'm so scared to say this on the internet, but I don't care. By a long shot, Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. Now, again, just like Survive the Night, this book takes a massive risk, and I know it will not be for everybody, but man, did it work for me. And side note, the TV show is also stellar. I am equally as obsessed. Let me tell you what it's about, and then I'll freak out and fangirl. This book follows Louise, who is a single mom, and she's out one night on the town reluctantly. She's like, oh, why am I here? She had to get a babysitter. It's like a whole thing, you know? And she starts chatting it up. Oh, it's also British. She starts chatting it up with this lovely chap. It's not written like that, but that's how I read it in my head. They make out at this bar. Flash forward a couple of days, Louise is starting a new job, and she is shook when she realizes that the man she kissed at the bar is her new boss. That's a wee bit of a problem, isn't it? But Louise and her boss, David, do start this steamy affair, even though David is married. And Louise slowly realizes that David and his wife, Adele, have a very strange relationship that is not all that meets the eye. And that is literally all I can tell you, babes. I know that's not a great synopsis. And if I heard that that was the synopsis to this book, I don't think I would read it solely based on that synopsis. But holy cow. If you are willing to suspend your disbelief just a skosh, this book will blow your mind. I'll also tell you, speculative twists don't usually work for me, but this was so well done. There were no plot holes. It made sense in the context of the book. I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it sets you up for the biggest twist I've ever read. I hope that's not hyping it up too much, but it was one of those absolutely chuck the book across the room. I remember screaming out loud, and I'm sure everybody in my apartment complex was like,
What is going on? Why are we screaming?
this is why we were screaming, guys, because you all need to read this book. And again, I know this book is not for everybody, but man, I love it. I love her. That is it for my video. Thanks for watching. I know it's super, super late, but book recommendations are book recommendations, so hopefully you don't mind. If you made it to the end, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe if you're not subscribed, and comment down below your favorite book of the year so far. I'm very curious to know. I love ya, and remember, if this dumb blonde is reading books, you should be too. Bye!